Pam Bondi walked into the courtroom with the same confidence that made her a household name. A former Florida Attorney General, she had built a career on tough prosecutions and high-profile cases. But today, the roles were reversed. She was the one on trial, or at least that's how the media framed it. The case against her was technical but serious, alleged violations of legal ethics related to lobbying and consulting work after leaving office. The judge, stern and expressionless, listened as the prosecution laid out its case. The courtroom was packed, reporters scribbling notes, cameras rolling. Bondi sat with her legal team, composed and unshaken. She knew the law inside and out. After all, she had spent years enforcing it. But would her knowledge be enough to get her out of this one? The prosecution argued that Bondi had engaged in unethical practices, citing a conflict of interest in her post-government work. They painted a picture of someone who had leveraged their influence in ways that crossed the legal line. The judge seemed unimpressed by Bondi's defense, at least at first. Then came the ruling. A fine. A steep one. The courtroom buzzed with reaction. A former top law enforcer now penalized for breaking the very rules she once upheld. The headlines practically wrote themselves. But then, something changed. As the court clerk finalized the ruling, Bondi leaned forward and spoke. Her voice was calm but firm. She cited an obscure precedent, one buried deep within the legal system, something even seasoned attorneys might overlook. It was a case from decades ago, setting a legal distinction that could alter the entire outcome. The judge hesitated, flipping through documents. Bondi's legal team jumped into action, submitting an immediate motion for reconsideration based on the precedent she cited. The courtroom watched in stunned silence. The judge, now visibly intrigued, called for a recess. Legal analysts scrambled to understand the implications. Had Bondi just found a loophole in her own case? During the break, news outlets speculated. Was this a desperate move, or had Bondi just pulled off a masterstroke? When court resumed, the judge addressed the courtroom. He acknowledged the validity of Bondi's argument, something no one had anticipated. The fine, while still enforceable, was now subject to a legal review that could ultimately overturn it. Legal experts dissected the moment in real time. Bondi had played her cards brilliantly, not just as a defendant, but as a legal tactician. The media narrative shifted. No longer was she just a former official caught in controversy. She was now a legal genius who had outmaneuvered the system using its own rules. The case took on a life of its own. Law students studied her defense, and legal scholars debated its implications. Could this precedent reshape ethics enforcement for former government officials? Some praised her brilliance, while others criticized what they saw as exploitation of legal gray areas. Outside the courtroom, reporters swarmed. Bondi, ever poised, simply smiled. "The law is clear," she said. "You just have to know where to look." And with that, she walked away. Not just as someone who had been fined, but as someone who had rewritten the game. The fallout from the courtroom moment was immediate. News outlets scrambled to update their headlines. What started as a simple story about a former official being fined had morphed into something far more compelling, a legal chess match with Bondi playing 5 moves ahead. Legal analysts, some of whom had been quick to criticize her earlier in the case, now found themselves in awe. On television, commentators dissected the legal precedent she had cited, pointing out that it wasn't just an obscure technicality, but a fundamental principle that had been hiding in plain sight. Within hours, social media erupted. Some called her a genius, a master of the law who had just schooled the entire justice system. Others were furious, claiming she had found a way to bend the law in her favor, just as powerful figures always seem to do. Memes circulated comparing her to legendary legal minds from history. A few even jokingly suggested that law schools should start teaching a class called the Pam Bondi defense. But Bondi wasn't done yet. She knew this legal battle wasn't just about her, it was about setting a precedent. If she could prove that the ruling against her was flawed, she wouldn't just overturn her own fine, she could reshape how similar cases were handled in the future. Her legal team filed an appeal, within days. This wasn't just a routine challenge. It was a strategic play designed to put the legal system itself under scrutiny. Could the court really enforce a penalty that conflicted with established legal precedent? Could they ignore the very statutes they were sworn to uphold? As the appeal moved forward, more details emerged. The case Bondi had referenced wasn't just some minor footnote in legal history. It had been a pivotal ruling in defining post-government ethics laws. The fact that no one else in the courtroom had thought to bring it up spoke volumes about Bondi's legal acumen. Then came the moment that truly cemented her reputation. The appellate court, after reviewing the arguments, issued a stunning decision. The original ruling had indeed overlooked key legal principles. The fine was officially reversed. The courtroom, once again packed with reporters, erupted into chaos. Some gasped. Others rushed to get statements. But Bondi? She just nodded, as if she had known this would happen all along. Outside the courthouse, she addressed the press. "The law is not just about punishment," she said. "It's about precision. It's about fairness. And most importantly, it's about knowing how to navigate it." That statement only fueled the fire. Supporters called her a hero, someone who had exposed the flaws in a system too quick to penalize without fully understanding the law. Critics, however, accused her of manipulating legal loopholes to her advantage. Either way, one thing was certain. Pam Bondi had just turned what should have been a routine fine into a legal spectacle that would be studied for years. Law firms began discussing her tactics in internal briefings. Judges debated whether new policies needed to be put in place to prevent similar challenges in the future. Political commentators wondered whether this victory would propel her back into the national spotlight. And just like that, Pam Bondi had once again proven why she was one of the most formidable legal minds of her generation. In the days following the court's stunning reversal, the legal world couldn't stop talking about Pam Bondi. Law professors assigned her case as required reading, breaking down her defense strategy for students eager to learn from a master. News segments replayed the moment she cited the obscure precedent that had turned the entire case upside down, analyzing every word, every pause, every calculated move. Some legal scholars argued that Bondi had done more than just defend herself. She had exposed weaknesses in the way legal ethics cases were prosecuted. If a former attorney general could find a flaw in the system this easily, how many other cases had been built on shaky legal ground? Suddenly, high-profile defense attorneys were digging into past rulings, looking for similar oversights that could be challenged. Meanwhile, political commentators debated what this meant for Bondi's future. Had she just positioned herself for a return to the public eye? Some speculated she might leverage this legal victory into a comeback, perhaps another high-ranking government role, maybe even a judgeship. Others suggested she could become a sought-after legal strategist, advising top officials on how to navigate the complexities of the law. One thing was clear. This was no ordinary courtroom battle. Bondi had taken what could have been a career-ending moment and transformed it into a masterclass in legal maneuvering. And the ripple effects were only just beginning. As the media frenzy continued, Bondi remained characteristically composed. She turned down multiple interview requests, choosing instead to let the legal world process what had just happened. But that didn't stop the speculation. Some reporters managed to catch up with her at a legal conference a few weeks later. When asked about the case, she simply smiled and said, "The law is a living thing. It's not just about knowing the rules, it's about understanding them better than anyone else." That single statement became a viral quote, shared by law students, attorneys, and even judges who begrudgingly acknowledged the brilliance of her defense. But behind the scenes, Bondi wasn't just celebrating, she was preparing. With her name back in the headlines, offers started rolling in. Prestigious law firms wanted her on board. Political allies floated the idea of her running for office again. Even media networks considered bringing her on as a legal analyst. Despite the whirlwind of opportunities, Bondi remained strategic. She had proven her legal genius, and now the question was, what would she do next? Would she reshape legal ethics laws to close the very loophole she had exploited? Would she take on high-profile clients, using her knowledge to challenge flawed rulings? Or would she stay behind the scenes, quietly influencing the system in ways only someone with her expertise could? For now, Pam Bondi wasn't saying. But one thing was certain: this wasn't the last time the world would hear her name. As weeks passed, the legal community remained fixated on Bondi's case. What had started as a straightforward fine had become a landmark moment in legal strategy. Law schools held debates about her tactics. Some professors praised her brilliance, while others argued that her maneuver exposed dangerous gaps in judicial oversight. Either way, her case was being studied like a chess match, where she had seen every move before anyone else. Meanwhile, her legal strategy didn't go unnoticed by powerful figures outside the courtroom. Corporate executives, politicians, and high-profile individuals facing legal scrutiny began reaching out to her team, hoping to retain her expertise. If Bondi could dismantle a ruling against herself with a single precedent, imagine what she could do for them. At the same time, lawmakers were taking notice. Some began drafting new legislation aimed at preventing similar legal defenses from being used in the future. Bondi's case had shown that existing laws contained enough ambiguity for a skilled lawyer to manipulate them to their advantage. If the system wanted to maintain its integrity, it needed to evolve. But Bondi wasn't concerned. In fact, she seemed to embrace the debate. To her, the law wasn't a set of static rules, it was a constantly shifting landscape, and those who understood its nuances held the real power. She didn't just play the game, she helped redefine it. One evening, an investigative journalist managed to sit down with one of her former colleagues. Off the record, they admitted that Bondi's legal maneuvering wasn't just impressive, it was expected. "She's always been like this," they said. "Pam doesn't just fight cases, she dismantles them, rewrites the narrative, and forces people to see the law in a way they never considered before. That's why she wins." And winning was exactly what she was doing. Legal conferences began, inviting her as a keynote speaker, eager to hear her insights on courtroom strategy. Law firms restructured their training programs, using her case as a prime example of how legal precedent could be wielded like a weapon. Even some of her harshest critics admitted that, agree with her or not, Pam Bondi had just changed the game. But Bondi herself remained elusive. While speculation swirled about her next move, she offered no hints. Some said she was planning to launch her own legal think tank, dedicated to challenging overreaching government regulations. Others believed she was positioning herself for a return to politics, using this victory as a springboard. Then, almost unexpectedly, she made an announcement. She would be writing a book, a deep dive into the case, the legal strategy behind it, and the broader implications for the justice system. It wasn't just a memoir, it was a blueprint for understanding the law in ways most people never could. The announcement sent shockwaves through the legal and political worlds. Would she expose flaws in the system that others had missed? Would she pull back the curtain on the inner workings of high-stakes legal battles? Or was this simply another strategic move setting the stage for something even bigger? No one knew for sure, but if there was one thing everyone had learned from this case, it was this: never underestimate Pam Bondi. As anticipation for her book grew, speculation reached a fever pitch. Was Pam Bondi preparing to upend the legal world again? Would she reveal insider knowledge that could shake institutions to their core? Some saw the book as a strategic move, positioning her for a new role in government or the private sector. Others feared it would expose weaknesses in the justice system that could be exploited by future legal tacticians. Meanwhile, Bondi remained characteristically composed. She made no grand media appearances, no dramatic statements, just a steady, calculated approach that only added to the intrigue. When asked about the book's content, she simply responded, "It's about understanding the law in ways most people never do." That cryptic response was enough to send analysts into a frenzy. Legal circles debated what this meant. Would Bondi use her case as an example of how legal systems could be outmaneuvered? Would she call for reform? Or was she about to expose a side of the justice system that few had ever seen? While the book was still in the works, Bondi's reputation continued to grow. Major law firms began shifting their legal strategies, studying her case for insights. Political strategists quietly analyzed whether her resurgence meant a return to public office. Even Hollywood took interest, with rumors of a film adaptation based on her courtroom victory. Then came the bombshell. Reports surfaced that Bondi was in talks to advise on a series of high-profile legal cases, ranging from corporate disputes to political ethics investigations. If true, this meant she wasn't just leveraging her victory for personal gain, she was actively reshaping the legal battlefield. Critics voiced concerns. Was Bondi's newfound influence a sign that the legal system rewarded those who knew how to manipulate it? Or was she simply proving that the law wasn't just about fairness, but about who understood it best? Either way, she had become a symbol, of genius to some, of controversy to others. But no one could deny one thing. She had taken a seemingly routine legal penalty and turned it into a defining moment of her career. As her book neared its release date, pre-orders skyrocketed. It was clear that the public, whether they admired or despised her, wanted to know the mind behind the legal masterstroke. And yet, even as the world speculated about her next move, Bondi remained focused. She had won in court. She had rewritten the legal conversation, and now she was about to share her blueprint with the world. The only question left was, what would she do next?